Hey guys, before we get started today, I just have a little retraction that I wanted to put in here. Last week we mentioned how it's important not to misname people when you're dealing with news and such, and then 2 weeks back we actually did that very thing. In our stinger about the sex scandals, I don't even know if you can call them sex scandals, consent scandals that have been going on, we named CinemaSins, we meant Screen Junkies. So apologies for that, and now on with the show.
Welcome to Kink Geek with your hosts, Step and Tams.
We're here to take a nerd's eye view of everything from sexuality to pop culture and whatever we hit along the way.
Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a real good time. Hey, how's it going?
I just remembered I forgot what episode this is.
I believe this is episode 88.
Sounds good.
We'll go with that.
How's it going, Tams?
I'm quite good. How are you doing?
I'm well.
That's good. So everything's going to go up from here, right?
I hope so.
Okay. So what's new? What's happening? What's shaking?
Well, I don't know if you'll end up hearing in our final product, but it's raining out.
It is.
It has been a cold, blustery day.
It's been amazing.
I actually love that too.
Mm-hmm.
At work, there's not much for me to look at except the sky. So when there's heavy winds, the sky often looks amazing.
And you sent me a picture of a rainbow today.
I did.
That was super cool. It was beautiful.
Didn't last very long.
No, well, at least you caught it when you caught it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a fun week, though.
Has it?
Yeah, we've had a lot go on this week. I have been. So last week we did a week plan for the first time, and then we promptly forgot to do one for this week. So
well,
go us.
You know, a lot happened last week.
So we decided Thursday to have a date night, which always follows with, well, what do we want to do? Do we want to go to the movies? But right now we are on a tight budget. So Step had noticed when we were in organizing the bedroom that it looked like we could move our little bed, because we went from a queen to a double, and slide it in front of the dresser under the window, and that would leave us this huge swath of space.
Yeah.
And so he's like, how about we try playing in this space? And boy, howdy. It worked really well.
It did. Aside from the fact that we really need to get our mop back from my mother's place because she borrowed it.
Yeah.
And, you know, because we no longer have carpets, so wooden floors with a long-haired cat, sweeping isn't enough. You have to have a mop as well.
Yeah.
But once we get the cleaning regimen down, I think that space will be really excellent as a play space. We also need to hang some toys on the walls, I think.
We need to hang art in the apartment completely. I had it pointed out by somebody who isn't generally somebody who would say, hey, you need art. That in my office, hey, you need art.
Yeah. And down the hallway, definitely.
Yeah, that's on the schedule. So
now, have you done your video yet for the channel? You were going to do a video tour of our new place. I
just did it yesterday, and it's going to go live probably sometime tomorrow.
Neat.
Yeah, I'm very happy with our new space. So did you find that having a place to play that isn't difficult to move in and isn't confining, did you find that making you more interested and eager to play?
Absolutely. Actually, this whole place, I don't know if it's just not having people around or the fact that the layout is better for us, but it's really made me more creative, I guess, more inclined to indulge when I feel like indulging.
Which is awesome. So that's definitely something, I think it's something we should look at as a podcast topic coming up, is, you know, something to do with if things aren't going well play-wise, other things to look at and what to do, and
or at least a subsection in our nano project.
Yeah, for sure.
Which have we talked about yet?
We talked about it last week.
We did talk about it last week.
Yeah,
all right.
That's
well,
exciting.
We're on schedule with that, except that we're way behind.
Yeah, which is exactly where we want to be right now, right?
November hasn't even started yet, and we're already way behind.
Yeah.
Oh well.
So we've been geeking out about something this week, so we thought we'd throw that section back into the podcast where it's supposed to be.
Right.
Because, yeah.
Yeah, actually, was that also date night? We ended up watching some scary movies?
I think so, yeah.
Scary. We say scary.
But they weren't scary.
One was kind of lame, but the other was on Netflix. They were both on Netflix, and we've heard this film talked about by other people that we respect, and so we decided to check it out. Mm-hmm. So if you like, I don't know, horror comedy, check out The Babysitter on Netflix.
It's in the same vein as Zombieland. It has that
kind
of very tongue-in-cheeky, almost wink at the camera kind of aesthetic.
I akin it more to like Cabin in the Woods, something like that.
Yeah, I just found it less
over the top?
Yeah.
It was more it was over the top.
Well, no, I thought it was over the top. I just thought it was a little like Cabin in the Woods was a little more, I don't want to say scary because it really wasn't scary, but the horror was a little more serious than in this.
Okay.
Like the kills in this were pretty ridiculous.
Okay, that's fair.
But it was really good, and it had such a good story, and the acting was really, really top notch.
And
so.
it looks like what it's supposed to make you think it is, and then it does a 180. About a third of the way through the film. So
and dumps you on your head. And
you should
really
definitely
cute.
check it out if you're a fan of that kind of film.
Yeah, so that was fun. And then on Saturday, yes, we got to do fun stuff at the shop.
At the card shop.
Mm-hmm. We got to play League.
Ixalan League has started for Magic the Gathering. And if you want to know details about that, you can check out our other podcast where we talk about Magic.
Mm-hmm, for sure. But on the surface of things, I opened my pool, and it was probably one of the worst pools I've ever opened.
I opened amazing.
I know, you spoiled thing. I went 1-3.
Oh.
That said, the one that I won was super fun, and a couple that I lost were super, super fun. Well, mostly fun. But some of it was pretty miserable. It just didn't...
It wasn't quite there.
No, but then I opened a pack, and I was like, great, there's absolutely nothing in the deck that I'm working in. And then...
Well, then switch the deck.
Then we looked, and I was like, oh, look, 16 merfolk. Huh, I guess I don't have a choice now, do I? So, now I have another deck.
So
we'll see if it works.
how do you think Laura's going to feel about your merfolk deck?
I think she's going to be sad, because now there's 3 of us with merfolk. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm going to try it.
We'll see how many people are in vampires by the end of the league. I think that's going to be a healthy part of the meta.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to try it out tonight, and I'm not completely tied tightly to it. So
sure.
Whatever I open and whatever
Remind me
we'll
before
see.
we leave for league, I have to get land, because I took all the land out of my deck so I could retool it.
Oh, that would suck.
Yeah. I'm sure they have some at the shop, but then I'd have to get new sleeves because I don't have it. Yeah, just remind me before we leave.
Sounds like a plan. So we're going to League after we're done here tonight, which is always fun. I like exciting.
And that reminds me, I need to take my League video somewhere in this apartment and post it to YouTube.
Mm-hmm. You can do it in my office if you like.
Okay.
It's nice and quiet.
Figure that out.
Yeah. I think the last thing I want to mention is that I started a new job last night.
She says job, and boy, it's a job of work.
It's work. It's physical work. So we're looking at ways to bring in extra cash and things that I can do at home are even better, so that I can still be at home sort of working on projects.
Especially if they don't take a lot of time, and this one's not going to take a lot of time. It's just going to be work.
So I did one of those, let's answer an ad on the internet, and it turns out it's for our local newspaper conglomerate, and it's just putting together flyers, putting them in a bag,
Flyer assembly.
Taking them back. So my back is now aching. Oh my gosh, and we have more to do tonight, but it was fine. We sat and watched How I Met Your Mother and chilled. Mm-hmm. So it was fun. I didn't mind it.
Neat.
And it will bring extra money in, so huzzah! You know. You're looking at me strangely, and I'm like, uh-oh.
I don't know what to follow that up with. So why don't we
How about
just
our main topic?
jump into our main topic?
Because it has nothing to do with anything we've talked about so far.
So, yeah. Throw us into the main topic.
Okay, so as you guys know, we've been doing What's Your Kink? And this is another one. This is one that up until about 5 years ago, I didn't even know existed.
I'm not sure if What's Your Kink is really the best frame for this sort of... it's not a kink so much as just an activity to be done in BDSM play. Sure.
But this is definitely not my kink. I mean, for me, like on me.
Okay.
On somebody else, maybe. So we're going to be talking about sounding today. And as I said, up until about 5 years ago, I didn't know this was a thing. I thought the only time you inserted anything in any sort of urethral tract was if you were unfortunate enough to be in the hospital and need a catheter. And I was like, why would somebody ever want to do that voluntarily? I've had one. It sucked.
Well, yeah.
But again, yeah, it sucked because it was a hospital. So then I found out that there's this thing called sounding, and I went, and my first reaction was, oh my, I don't know, this just, So let's learn about it.
So for me, the weirdest thing, this is just probably something that's weird for me, is that sounding and sounds, the implements, are spelt exactly like the word sound is in noise, and that just freaks me out. I don't know why.
What? But
okay. I know, it's weird.
So it should have a different spelling?
It's just, it should be a homonym that is spelt differently somehow, but whatever.
Okay, so we're going to start from the beginning and kind of talk about the definition. And this is less a definition and more kind of a general overview of what it is we're talking about here. So, as we've mentioned, sounding or urethral sounding is the medical use of probes called sounds, not to be confused with the noise, to increase the inner diameter of the urethra and locate obstructions in it. That's what it classically was used for. So basically, you're taking the sound instrument and inserting it into your urethra. So generally through the penis, or if you're female, through the female urethra. So they're also used to stretch the urethra to receive genital piercings. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
I did not know that either. So, who knew? And it was also originally in medical stuff used to keep the urinary tract open for men with enlarged prostates. So,
or to catheterize in the case of
you being in the hospital and you need to not be getting up and running to the loo.
So this is, of course, something that gets played with in medical play a lot. In hospital scenes.
Sure.
I worked at a dungeon that had like a medical room. It had like the stretcher and the whole thing, and a nurse, latex nurse outfit, and all that stuff. And I don't know that they ever did sounding there, but it would have fit right in.
Have you ever seen it, be it online or...
I have seen it. I've seen a bunch of self-sounding and some bondage and domination videos with sounds. And it's always been sort of intriguing to me, in that way that the things that we do for entertainment are always intriguing.
Yeah, I watched some for the very first time for this podcast. You're welcome. And it was a little tightening my stomach, kind of like... It's
one of those things that if you haven't been exposed to before, it can be quite disconcerting, because you have no real frame of reference for it.
So, to explain a little bit, what a sound is it's a long, smooth rod made from metal or silicone, so it can be soft or harder, and it can either be straight or curved depending on the type, and that's what's used. It's inserted with lube, generally speaking.
Yeah, you should probably be using lube whenever you're dealing with something like this, especially if you haven't done it before. I mean, if you haven't done it before, lots of lube.
Yeah. This can also be used to stimulate the prostate gland and for types of bladder control. So that kind of gets us into the why. We'll kind of move down into that. So why would you do something like this?
I remember hearing somewhere, I can't remember, but years ago, it was someone described sounding as it's like pissing steel. And I thought that was very evocative imagery.
Yeah, that definitely...
It's kind of a badass, tough guy kind of thing to say.
Yeah, I can get that. Yeah, wow, that's really ringing.
I threw you off there.
Yeah, you did. So, but still, like, for me, that's not a good enough reason to be inserting things in places that traditionally I've never felt should have need of things being inserted there.
Some people engage in pain play just to see how tough they are. And
Absolutely.
This is a good... Anything involving, typically, men, the penis is... one of those things that's very sensitive on an emotional or intellectual front. Like,
oh, I can totally see that. Yeah. Now, I'm not that tough, so I have no problem saying that. But there are other interesting reasons that more make me go, oh, okay, I totally get it. I don't think I'm brave enough, but I totally get it. So, yeah, absolutely. That kind of, yeah, well, do your best. Also, some people enjoy that feeling of being penetrated in a place that is unusual or
in a way
different.
That is unusual. Like, with men, again, specifically, the anal penetration stigma around, homophobia is huge. So this is a form of potential male penetration that has nothing to do with other men if you're concerned or paranoid about that kind of thing.
And I saw a lot of stuff written about that when I was looking into the whys across the internet, and there was some stuff on Reddit they were talking about for male-bodied cisgendered men who may be uninterested, uncomfortable, or just it's not their thing for anal penetration, that this is something a little bit different, that they can understand the feeling of a penetration. So I was like, okay, yeah, I can totally get that. Also, it is said that sounding can access the prostate in a way that no other type of play can, which I suppose that is definitely something else right there.
It can also play into other kinks like orgasm denial. I don't know, because I haven't done the research, if it's technically possible to ejaculate while sounded. But there are sounds that are specifically designed to look like plugs. So it's like...
Yeah, and we're going to talk about them a little bit in a little bit. Okay. Yeah, when we talk about the how.
I have not read your show notes.
Oh, well, isn't that cool? So you're learning as we go. So one of the other things that kept popping up is that it's thought that there's a nerve cluster down under the urethra that can be stimulated by direct manipulation.
It's funny we're talking... It is thought that there's a nerve cluster. Don't you know?
No, I couldn't find any hard medical... Because generally when you're looking at sounding and medical research, it's not about pleasure or play. It's about...
That's something we've talked about, and I think we should probably make a heavy notation of in our book, is that medical and sexual are not always... They don't even align a lot of the time.
No, and it's a shame, and it almost makes me want to go back to school and become a doctor, or a scientist of some sort to do the research.
I think more doctors need to be aware and empathetic to that sort of thing. And on the other end, I'd like to also... this made me think of... We were watching How I Met Your Mother, binging it recently. And one of those things that it's a great example of is TV sitcoms penchant to make fun of men for not knowing anything about women's genitalia. Mm-hmm. And yet here we're both ignorant of exactly where nerve clusters are, even as interested in sex and sexuality as we are, in male genitalia. So there's something of a, I don't know what you call it, a double standard there, I guess.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was funny.
I did look, but there's just, and if anybody out there is a medical professional and they can confirm or deny, there just hasn't been studies for this kind of stuff. So it's hard to say, but that
certainly
is
not peer-reviewed studies.
No, but that is the general consensus that is what's happening. It's also used, as you kind of touched on, in mental play, in different types of mental play. Mm-hmm. It can be used in torture play. It can be used in bondage play. All sorts of interesting things like that.
Torture domination is an interesting one because there is that... I'm reminded of pop culture again, but there's in Casino Royale, a classic scene in the novel where James Bond is being tortured, and the villain says, you don't need elaborate torture techniques. All you need is the knowledge that your manhood is slowly being taken from you. And that's the sort of psychological horror of the play that some people really enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can understand that. It can also involve pain. It doesn't have to.
I have a hard time believing that unless you have thoroughly worked out the muscles, that this play wouldn't involve any sort of pain.
Though some people say the same thing about anal, and there are people who say it doesn't hurt at all.
I would contend that anal almost always hurts, especially the first time. Like, that's another one of those things where, yeah, it's gonna hurt a bit, but not as much as, a solid day's work at any physical job.
Sure.
Like, there's pain involved in almost any new
and that's the key there is new. I think after time, after repetition of doing it, I'm sure there are people that have been doing sounding for years that can just sit down and
that has borne out by accounts that I've heard from people.
Yeah, but when you're starting, I'm sure there's pain. But you can also specifically invoke pain for pain's sake in a play type environment. So now we are going to get into the how, sort of.
We're going to get into the how a little bit, but please bear in mind that we are not firsthand experienced with this particular
and
activity.
And while a lot of the professionals have said that this is on the safer edge of edge play, it is still edge play. And there are things that can go wrong. So we're going to go into the hows a little bit, but I am going to provide you guys with links to people who know their stuff and who have pages and pages and pages of reading. You can contact them for, especially one of the fellows, for personal instruction. He does workshops if this is something you're interested in. And it's something that I would encourage as far as trying things, to actually go out and read stuff yourself and talk to people. Because you're putting something into your body through something that isn't normally meant to have. It's
not something you want to do by yourself for the first time without any direction.
Okay, so the first thing is you need to purchase surgical grade sounding equipment. I cannot stress this enough. You're going to go on Reddit, you're going to go on X Hamster or wherever you get your stuff, and you're going to watch people using pen cap lids and, whatever. Don't. I would encourage even people who have done this for years, don't do that. Yeah. But if you have never done this, do not do that because there is such a high risk for infection. It is better to spend $50 or $25 and buy a surgical grade equipment package.
Think of it this way. If this is something that you're interested enough in to try, then you should be doing it right.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that this is a medical procedure. Even if done recreationally, it's a medical procedure, And so they make medical equipment to a standard for a reason.
Very much so.
Anytime you're using something that is not meant to go inside the body, that you are opening yourself to added risk.
Yep.
That's why needle play workers use medical grade needles or syringes.
Yeah, but
not syringes. Metal needle caps.
Yeah, and they use needle buckets, and everything is done the way it would be done if you were in an office.
Everyone I know who does needle play has a sharps container.
Yeah.
It's not something that you just mess around with.
No, never. Another very, very important thing is do not use anything that will break. There are glass sounds out there. Don't.
Wouldn't recommend it.
I would not. I strongly suggest not doing that. The second thing that you're going to need is surgical lubricant. And it's different from your dip-diddy-doo or whatever it is that you use as, general play lube or intercourse lube.
There's another... Sorry, we're going through these things really quickly, but I want to kind of stress...
Let's slow down.
There are glass toys which are body safe, but those are usually hefty things like dildos.
Their diameter is a lot greater than you would fit in the end of your penis.
What we're talking about for sounds are usually less than a centimeter thick, up to a centimeter. I mean, you can get larger ones if you've been stretching for a while, but we're talking about something very thin here, and when glass gets that thin, it does get fragile. And there's just a break point with glass.
And you really don't want anything...
Yeah.
We don't need to paint you a picture. I'm sure you can figure it out.
Moving on next to lubricant, not an oil-based lubricant. We've had some pushback from people about this before, but studies show that oil-based lubricant increases the chance of infection. You're looking for surgical lubricant because you're not messing around here.
Yeah, and it is different from the stuff that you're going to buy at your local novelty shop or at Shoppers Drug Mart.
It's thicker, for one thing. It's
more viscous?
Less viscous? I can't remember. It holds together and it stays in place, and you're using a certain amount of it. Hi, Salem. This is not the conversation for kitty cats. Keep your sounds away from kitty cats.
You don't want hair. But yeah, every place that I looked at as far as this kind of thing is saying, go out there, go online and Google surgical lubricant and you can find it. It's important to avoid infections and introduction of bacteria. And
we're not saying that you can't do it without it. We're just saying that if you're going to do this, you should do it right.
Yeah.
Because
we want
somebody
you to be safe.
Is going to comment to us, well, I've been doing this for years with just the over-the-counter stuff and I've been fine. Well, maybe you have, but we're talking about reducing risks here.
Yeah. Now, before you use them, after you use them, if the sounds that you're purchasing are stainless steel or something that can be immersed in boiling water, that is one of the best things you can do, is to boil them after, to make sure things are being cleaned in a manner that is very high. Bad English. Okay. So the point is, we again can't stress enough, you don't want to be introducing bacteria into your insides because you run the risk of urinary tract infections among other stuff. So the other thing is, yes, there are sounds that are like plugs, and that is where a lot of people suggest you start.
Okay. Is
getting one of these. You don't want to start with the smallest sound to start with, which sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Well, a little bit.
There's a reason. Because if you're not careful, if you don't really know what you're doing, with a very small sound, you can puncture the urethral wall. And it's as not nice as it sounds like it might be. And you don't want to do that.
No.
So don't do that. So yeah, not the I think they were saying the 3/4, but go read the stuff online. I wasn't getting into all of the nitty gritty because I don't
because
feel
we're not doing
comfortable.
a how-to guide here. We're doing an introduction.
I don't feel comfortable offering that kind of level of advice on something that I've not personally been involved in. This is more of a generalized, what is this thing called sounding? Okay. Why does it sound like sounds? And freak step out. Don't know. So, two other interesting things. And this, if you think about it, makes a lot of sense. Women have a shorter urethra. They are more prone to get a urinary tract infection or a bladder infection. So it's ultra important to have proper equipment and to have proper cleaning. It's funny because, again, if you had asked me about sounding, I would have just always assumed it would be something you do on a male. It just never occurred to me because, I can...
You got a urethra too.
I do. But you see, I can understand, like, a penis has length to it. So inserting something through the end, I can kind of visualize. But with a woman, it just didn't make as much sense to me. But now...
Now you know.
Now I know. Still not something I have any intention of trying, but I get it now.
Okay.
So, men, your urethra is long. But you, too, can get a UTI if you're using dirty equipment. Especially if you're using the long gear that is long enough to get into your bladder. Because there are some people that play with longer stuff that goes right down into the bladder. It can cause a bladder.
Up into the bladder.
Up into the bladder. And it can cause a bladder infection.
And to be clear, anytime you're dealing with sounding whatsoever, you're technically increasing your chance of urinary tract infections because those areas aren't meant to be held open. So you're introducing a foreign object to the body. You're increasing risk of infection. A very small amount. Like, it's not something that you need to be afraid of, but it's just a reason to be cautious.
Absolutely. So that's kind of the long and the short of sounding. I feel like I at least
Was that intentional?
No. I'm not that. No.
Okay.
So, now you threw me off. So,
the short and the long?
Yes, that's better. So, I now at least feel like I understand and kind of have a grasp on what this is all about. And
so then tell me, Tamara.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
It's not something I myself am interested to have happen to me.
Okay.
If it's something that my male or female partner would be interested in trying, I would totally be open to being the helper, not the receiver. That doesn't bother me in the least bit.
Okay.
But, yeah. Oh, yes, and just to backtrack and reiterate, as with all insertion type play, more lube is your friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how about you? How does this fall for you? Like, where does this fall in your level of...
I'm intrigued.
As a receiver or as a, hey, let me do this to you?
Both. I'm intrigued. I am kind of generally interested in most things. And this is one of those things where it's a medically sound procedure that is low risk. It's not like needle play is a little more makes me nervous, because it's creating a wound, and I'd still try that. And
it's funny because needle play
doesn't bother you at all.
Doesn't wig me at all. You know what I probably think it is? It's because I've had a few surgeries in my life, and I've had catheters.
Because it is a medical procedure.
And after having the last surgery I had, that was the only part of it that really, really bothered me, was lying there with the catheter in, and I just kept asking them, can I take it out? They're like, no, not until you can get up and walk on to the bathroom on your own. I'm like, let's do it. And they're like, you just had the surgery 12 hours ago. I'm like, no, I'm good. Let's go. I just wanted it out. So there's that ever-present feeling of needing to pee, which I'm sure for some is a very strong draw. For me, it was
For me, if I'm in the submissive mindset, which doesn't happen very often, it's one of those things that I think I would enjoy from a detached clinical point of view,
okay.
As a thing that the dominant would want to do to me. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Well, I've never been put in the position where it was an option, but I don't know that it was something that I would seek out in play, but I would be open to the possibility.
But it's not something you would actively pursue alone on your own.
No, not alone on my own, definitely.
No, me neither. What about medical play in general?
I have had generally positive interactions with hospital staff and doctors in general. So there's no fear of hospitals or doctors that really resonates with medical play for me. But give me a nurse in one of those bonnets and a short skirt and I'll be game for just about anything.
Fine with it. And it's funny because, I had asthma as a kid, so I spent a lot of time in the hospital. And I have had 2 or 3 surgeries. And yet, for me, the hospitals don't scare me at all. To me, they're a place of healing and of safety.
Should be.
Yeah.
And this isn't the podcast for it, but there are some hospitals that are better than others for that. If the hospital staff and really the hospital architects or designers are interested in a place of healing rather than running a business, I think it's a lot better. Although I shouldn't say that about business. Sometimes business ideals actually match up really well with patient care as opposed to capitalist ideals.
Fair enough. Yeah, I've had nothing but good experiences. So anyways, this was our little talk about sounding. And
we've got a whole other page of notes. I thought we weren't done. Blank space. Gasp.
Blank space.
All right.
It's not it's not that deep a well to jump into. Yeah, I did mean that one. So, yeah.
I'm sure it's a deeper well than we're...
Yeah, and I mean, there's only so much you can learn by reading or by watching videos online. If this were something that we ourselves had been involved in, it would be there'd be more to talk about, I think. But if you out there have done this, if it's something that you're really interested in, please let us know so we can add some more and do a little update and talk some more.
We would love to hear from you, your stories, or your thoughts on it in general. If it's something that you've never heard of, or something that you've been interested in, or really not interested in, let us know.
So until next week, thank you for spending some time with us.
Thanks.
Bye. Join us next week for a very special episode of Kink Geek, where we're going to delve into Halloween. You're looking at me like I'm crazy.
I had that laugh and it was great, but then you deleted it because you wanted to start again.
But you're supposed to laugh.
It's fine.
Now nobody's going to want to listen,
Watch, listen?
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us this week. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Just a quick reminder that Kink Geek and everything we do is supported by you, our fantastic listeners, via our Patreon. Visit patreon.com and consider becoming a patron for access to all of our bonus content. See you next time.